There once was a young woman named Madeline who lived far away in a quiet part of Canada, where the air was crisp and the nights stretched long and still. She wasn't running from anything, not exactly. Her life was full of ordinary moments, a job that kept her busy, people who cared for her in ways she sometimes struggled to see, and a world that moved steadily forward, with or without her. And yet, something inside her didn't quite fit, like her shadow moved at a slightly different rhythm, like her reflection didn't always feel like her own. Madeline carried invisible weight, not the kind that breaks all at once, but the kind that slowly, quietly settles in your bones. Her mind, like a stormy lake, could shift without warning. Panic attacks would come like lightning, sudden and sharp. Her chest would tighten, her breath would shorten, and the world would narrow to a single point of fear. On those days, she'd call her mother, and her mother would always answer. Just breathe, sweetheart. You're not alone. I'm here. That voice, steady and warm, was a thread in the dark, guiding Madeline back to herself. But not every moment could be soothed. Some nights she sat awake, arguing with strangers on the internet, chasing the sharp edge of distraction. Other nights she drank, not to forget, but to feel something different. The world felt too loud and too quiet at once, and Madeline, though never lost, sometimes didn't know where she was going. But then came the mountain. Celeste Mountain wasn't a famous place. It wasn't a tourist destination, or marked on maps in bold. But for Madeline, it called louder than any city skyline or distant beach ever could. It whispered in the back of her mind, "Come see if you can climb me." Not to escape, but to understand. To prove to herself that she was capable, that she was still here. And so she packed a small bag, not much more than the essentials, and left without fanfare. She didn't tell many people. This was for her. At the base of the mountain, the air was thin and quiet. Snow drifted in slow spirals, settling softly on pine needles and stones. Madeline took her first steps onto the trail, her boots crunching against the frost-covered ground. Each breath she took felt sharper here, but cleaner somehow, the kind of air that filled the lungs and cleared the head. The wind tugged at her red hair, and her eyes, wide with nervous energy, scanned the path ahead. This mountain didn't promise safety or comfort, but it promised truth. That was enough. Madeline hadn't even reached the steep parts before the fear returned. Her heart raced, her hands trembled. A familiar tightness clawed up her chest. She wanted to turn back, to find the road home, to forget she ever started. But her phone buzzed, and instinctively she called the only number that ever helped. "Mom," she whispered, her voice shaking. Her mother didn't hesitate. "You're okay, sweetheart. You're doing something hard, but I know you can do it." Madeline didn't reply right away. Her breath came slowly, tears prickling her eyes. She didn't feel strong, but her mother's voice held her steady, just enough to take one more step, and another. She didn't talk about everything, not the darker corners, not the drinking, not the moments she'd screamed at the world from behind a screen. trying to make someone, anyone, understand. But even so, her mother knew enough. Enough to love her without question. As Madeline climbed, something strange began to happen. It wasn't just the cold or the exhaustion. It was something inside her. A voice, her own voice, began to speak back. But this voice didn't sound kind. It was sharp and cold and too familiar. A version of Madeline that lived in the corners of mirrors, in the quiet doubts that surfaced when no one was watching. "You can't do this," it whispered. "You're too weak. You're a mess." Madeline paused, her breath catching in the frozen air. She shook her head, gripping the strap of her backpack. "I'm not," she whispered, even if she didn't fully believe it. But the voice didn't stop. It clawed at her thoughts, picking at her fears. "You think climbing a mountain will fix you. You can't even fix your own life." Madeline pressed forward. The snow deepened, the wind howled, but she didn't stop. Her feet were tired, her body sore, but her heart burned with something else now. A quiet defiance. She didn't know how to silence the voice, but she could keep going in spite of it. At times, that other version of her seemed almost real, like it might step out of the shadows, wearing her face, speaking her thoughts. But maybe that was part of the climb. The mountain wasn't just made of stone and snow. It was made of her, of the pieces she'd buried, of the doubts she'd swallowed, of the questions she didn't yet know how to ask. Questions about who she truly was, about the ways she never felt like she belonged, about how her reflection sometimes felt like a costume she didn't remember putting on. She didn't have answers, not yet, but each step carved a little more space for her to listen. There were moments of peace on the mountain too, little pockets of stillness, when the wind paused and the stars came out, and the world felt wide, but not so empty. She would sit on a rock, legs tucked beneath her, and look up at the endless sky. In those moments, she remembered her childhood bedroom, the photo on the shelf of her and her mom. Her hair had been shorter then, her smile simpler. She wondered what that younger version of herself would think now. Would she be proud? Would she understand? Maybe not. But maybe she'd see the same quiet courage shining through. Madeline wasn't climbing to become someone else. She was climbing to meet herself, the parts she'd hidden, the parts she feared, the parts she'd tried to silence. The voice inside didn't go away, but slowly it changed. "You're still here," it said one night, quieter now. Even after everything, Madeline nodded to no one. "I am." Her hands were cold, her face stung from the wind, but her heart beat strong in her chest. She had never been broken, just unfinished. Near the peak, everything felt thinner, the air, the noise, the thoughts. The mountain, harsh and steep as it was, had carved something new inside her. a space where self-doubt and strength could exist together, where fear didn't mean failure, and softness didn't mean weakness. She hadn't fixed her anxiety. The panic attacks hadn't vanished. The mountain didn't erase the pain or make her whole, but it gave her something she didn't know she was missing. It gave her proof that she could do something hard, that she could begin again, that she could carry every sharp edge and aching thought and still rise. She reached the summit at dawn. The sun spilled over the horizon like honey, soft and golden. Clouds danced below her feet. The world looked smaller now, but she felt larger, not because anything had changed around her, but because something had changed within. She sat alone at the top of the world, breath visible in the morning chill, and let the silence wrap around her like a blanket. She didn't cry. She didn't cheer. She just sat, present, whole, enough. Madeline didn't need the mountain to tell her who she was, but by climbing it, she found the space to begin asking, not just about strength or fear, but about truth, about identity, about the pieces of herself that didn't yet have names, but lived deep in her heart like seeds waiting to bloom. She would go back down eventually, return to the life that waited, the job, the friends, the quiet routines. But she would carry this mountain with her, not as a conquest, but as a companion, a reminder that change is possible, that healing isn't loud, that becoming yourself is the hardest climb of all and the most beautiful. As the sky turned soft with morning light, Madeline smiled. She was still here, still climbing, and that was enough. Sleep well, dream big, and never stop believing in the bond that makes the journey worth it.